There is a specific kind of loneliness that comes with being the person who thinks too much. Not the loneliness of being disliked, not the loneliness of being excluded, but the quieter, more persistent kind, the loneliness of being in a room full of people and still feeling like nobody is quite on the same frequency. Of having conversations that stay shallow, not because the other people are unkind, but because there is a gap somewhere that never quite closes. Of wanting the kind of intellectual and emotional depth in your relationships that you can access easily in your own head, but almost never seem to find in actual human interaction. If that is familiar to you, if you have spent significant portions of your life feeling more at home in a book or an idea, or your own internal world, than in the social spaces most people seem to navigate effortlessly, then this video is for you. Not to tell you that you are broken, or that you are too much, or that you need to learn to enjoy small talk, but to tell you something that is genuinely more useful than any of that. To tell you why this specific kind of loneliness happens, what it is actually about beneath the surface, and what the fix is that almost nobody in this conversation ever seems to name. Let me start with the pattern itself, because it is more specific and more consistent than most people realize. Highly intelligent people, and I mean this in the broadest sense, not just IQ, but people who think deeply, who are analytically sharp, who are emotionally perceptive, who are used to operating in complex internal landscapes. These people disproportionately report feeling lonely, not occasionally, chronically, as a background condition of their social experience that follows them across different environments, different friend groups, different life stages. They move to a new city hoping the social scene will be different. They find a new group of people hoping this will be the one where they finally feel at home. And they find the same thing they always find. Pleasant enough, fine, but not it, not the depth they're looking for, not the frequency they've been trying to tune into their whole lives. And the narrative most of them build around this, the story they tell themselves to explain it, goes something like this. I am different. I am more complex than most people. The depth I want in relationships is simply not available because most people do not think or feel at this level. I have found the few people who can meet me where I am, and outside of those rare exceptions, this is just what social life is going to feel like for someone like me. That story is understandable. It is also, in a specific and important way, wrong. Not completely wrong. The part about genuinely clicking with some people more than others is real. The part about depth being rarer than you'd like is real. But the conclusion, that loneliness is an inevitable byproduct of intelligence, and that the solution is to simply find the rare exceptions who are at your level, that part is wrong. And it is wrong in a way that keeps highly intelligent people trapped in a pattern that is entirely, or at least largely, of their own making. Here is what is actually happening. The loneliness that highly intelligent people experience is almost never primarily about the intelligence gap between them and other people. It is about a set of social habits, some conscious, some completely unconscious, that directly prevent the kind of connection they are looking for from forming, and those habits, in most cases, grew directly out of the same traits that make them smart. They are not incidental, they are structural. They are what happens when exceptional cognitive and perceptual ability develops inside a social context that did not always make that ability safe. Let me walk through what those habits are, because recognizing them is the entire first step. The first habit is the tendency to stay in the head rather than the heart in conversation. Intelligent people often default to analysis of situations, of ideas, of other people, of themselves. They approach conversation the way they approach problems, which is to say with a kind of precision and rigor that works beautifully for ideas and significantly less well for human connection. They intellectualize their own emotions rather than feeling them. They analyze other people's motivations rather than empathizing with their experience. They turn potentially resonant moments into philosophical discussions. And the conversations that result are often fascinating and entirely unfulfilling, full of content and empty of warmth. The person across from them can feel the difference. They sense that they are being engaged with cerebrally rather than humanly, that they are an interesting subject rather than a felt presence. And that sensing creates a distance, not hostility, not dislike, just a subtle coolness that prevents the interaction from ever reaching the depth that both people might have been capable of in a different mode. The second habit is unconscious signaling of boredom, impatience, or evaluation. This one is painful to look at honestly, but it is extremely common. Highly intelligent people who process information quickly and are sensitive to nuance often find themselves genuinely bored in conversations that are moving too slowly or staying too shallow. And that boredom, even when it is carefully managed, even when it is not expressed directly, leaks. It shows up in micro-expressions, in the quality of engagement, in the eyes that have gone slightly distant, in the response that arrived a fraction of a second too quickly because the other person had barely started speaking before their point had already been processed and filed. People feel this evaluation. They feel the invisible judgment that is being passed even when no words of judgment are spoken. And when people feel evaluated and found wanting, when they sense that the person they're talking to is privately rating the quality of their contribution, they shut down. They stop offering the real things because the real things feel too exposed in an environment that is quietly critical. And the person who generated all of that with their own unexpressed impatience is then left in a shallower conversation than they wanted, blaming the other person's depth rather than examining their own signals. The third habit is using intelligence as protection. This is the deepest one and the one most difficult to see from the inside. For many highly intelligent people, being the smart one, the analytical one, the one who sees clearly and thinks rigorously, that identity was forged in environments where it was the primary source of safety and value. Maybe emotional expression was not safe or was not modeled well. Maybe vulnerability was met with dismissal or exploitation. Maybe the inner life, the sensitivity, the feeling life underneath the thinking life was too tender for the environments it was in, and the intellect became armor. A way of engaging with the world that kept the most exposable parts protected. The result is a person who is genuinely brilliant in conversation and genuinely defended in connection, who can discuss any idea with depth and precision and cannot quite let another person actually close, who has made thinking about everything, including their own emotions and relationships, a substitute for the messier and more vulnerable experience of actually feeling them, and who, for all their perceptiveness about the psychology of others, maintains a blind spot about the specific dynamic their own protective intelligence is creating in every relationship they have. The fourth habit, one that flows directly from the third, is holding connection to an impossible standard. Highly intelligent people often know, with great precision, exactly what they want from relationships. They can articulate the depth, the reciprocity, the intellectual and emotional resonance they are looking for. They have had moments, brief, bright, rare, where something like that seemed within reach, and the memory of those moments has set the benchmark. And most actual human interaction, measured against that benchmark, falls short. The habit is to look for the perfect before accepting the real, to discount connections that are genuine but partial, to move through ordinary interactions waiting for the extraordinary version and not fully investing in what is actually there. And because they never fully invest in what is actually there, because there is always a part of them holding back, waiting to see if this is the real thing, they never develop the ordinary connections into the extraordinary ones, because extraordinary connection always grows from the consistent investment in the ordinary version of it. You cannot skip the accumulation phase. You cannot arrive at depth without going through the shallower water first, with this specific person, over actual time. So what is the fix? What is the thing that nobody in this conversation seems to say? The fix is not to find smarter people, though compatibility matters and does not need to be dismissed. The fix is not to lower your standards for depth, though humility about what depth requires is necessary. The fix is not to learn to enjoy small talk, though being able to move through different conversation registers is a genuine skill worth having. The fix is to close the gap between your head and your heart, to let yourself be moved by people rather than just interested in them, to allow genuine emotional response, the kind that is felt in the body, not processed in the mind, to inform how you show up in conversation, to let other people's experience actually land on you rather than passing through the analytical filter that arrives at its conclusions before the feeling has had a chance to form. This is not about becoming less intelligent. It is about adding something to the intelligence that is already there. The most resonant human connections are not purely emotional, and they are not purely intellectual. They are both at once, the mind engaged and the heart open at the same time. And the highly intelligent people who have the most genuine, lasting, deeply satisfying relationships are almost always the ones who learned, at some point, sometimes through significant loss or loneliness. That being smart in conversation is not the same as being present in it. That thinking about someone is not the same as being with them. That analyzing what another person means is not the same as allowing what they mean to actually reach you. Here is what this looks like practically, because the concept is important, but you also need to know what to actually do differently starting now. In your next real conversation, not a casual exchange, but an actual conversation with someone who might matter to you, try this. When they say something, before you think about what it means or how to respond, ask yourself one question. What does this make me feel? Not what does it mean? Not what is the most accurate analysis of it? Not what is the appropriate response? What does it make me feel? And then let that feeling, whatever it actually is, However simple or unclear, be the thing that informs your response rather than the analytical conclusion you'd normally reach for. It will feel imprecise, it will feel less controlled. It may feel uncomfortable in a specific way that is different from your usual social discomfort. Not the anxiety of being evaluated, but the vulnerability of being exposed. Because feelings are less defensible than thoughts. You cannot logic someone into respecting your emotional response, the way you can logic them into acknowledging an accurate analysis. Feelings are just there, offered, available to be met or not met. And that availability, that genuine opening of the self, rather than the presentation of the processed self, is exactly what creates the conditions for the depth you have been looking for. The second practical thing is to practice curiosity about the ordinary details of people's lives without immediately elevating them into something larger. One of the most persistent habits of highly intelligent people in conversation is the move toward the abstract, taking a specific, personal thing someone says and zooming out to the general principle, the broader pattern, the philosophical implication. And while that move can be fascinating and connective at the right moment, done habitually, it removes the conversation from the specific human experience that generated it. It turns the personal into the conceptual, and the personal is where connection lives. Stay in the specific longer than you're comfortable with. Ask about the details. Follow the story without immediately reaching for the meaning of the story. Let the person's specific, ordinary experience, not the universal truth it represents, not the psychological pattern it illustrates, not the interesting implication it carries, be interesting in itself. Because to the person living it, it is. And your willingness to meet them in the specific details of their specific life, without rushing to abstract it into something more intellectually interesting, is one of the most powerful signals of genuine care you can offer. The third practical thing is to stop waiting for exceptional people and start investing in the actual people. The colleague you see 3 times a week, who you've kept at arm's length because you've pre-decided they're not deep enough. The acquaintance who keeps making genuine attempts to connect that you've responded to with pleasant but maintained distance. The person who is clearly drawn to you but whose offerings you've been evaluating rather than receiving. These are not substitute connections to hold the place until the real ones arrive. These are the real ones, or they could be if you brought the version of yourself to them that you've been saving for someone who passes the test. Most people do not reveal their depth until safety is established. Most people save their most interesting, most genuine, most complex self for relationships where that self has been explicitly welcomed. If you have been signaling through your evaluative presence and your maintained distance that you are waiting to be impressed before you invest, then the people around you have learned not to offer the impressive version of themselves to you. They have given you the version that felt safe to give, and then you've confirmed your pre-existing conclusion that they are not deep enough. The loop only breaks when you break it, by investing first, by offering your genuine self to someone before they've passed the test, by deciding that this person, right here, is worth knowing fully, and letting that decision change how you show up. Here is the final thing. The loneliness that highly intelligent people feel most acutely is not a function of their intelligence. It is a function of what they have done with it, how they have used it, sometimes brilliantly and sometimes at enormous personal cost, to stay safe from the specific vulnerability that genuine human connection requires. The mind became the home because the heart was less reliably safe. The ideas became the primary relationship because people were less reliably available. The analysis became the mode because it was more controllable than the feeling. Those adaptations made sense when they were formed. They were real responses to real environments. But you are not in those environments anymore, and the people around you now, the ones you keep at intellectual arm's length, the ones you assess before you invest, the ones you process rather than feel, they are not the ones who made it unsafe to be fully human in the first place. Let them be different. Let yourself be different with them. Not by becoming less of what you are, but by adding to it the thing you've been protecting for so long that you may have forgotten you still have it. The capacity to be moved. The willingness to be known. The choice to be human first and smart second, at least in the moments that matter. That is the fix. And it is available in the next real conversation you have with another person. Drop a comment. Does this land for you? Is this the kind of loneliness you've been living with? I want to know. Subscribe if this one reached something that most content doesn't reach. Every week, one thing that goes all the way down. See you in the next one.